If you've been hooked on a good game, you probably know there's a good chance you've done some weird things. We're here to talk about 10 problems only addicted gamers face. Of course, addicted is a bit of a strong word, but if you're here, there's a good chance that you know what we're talking about. So let's get started off with number 10. Here's a good example of knowing that you're in way too deep. Say something like your 1300-hour save finally gets corrupted or takes too long to load. Do you know what I mean here? Your save file is so big from so many hours played, or maybe bases created or items stored or whatever obsessive thing you do that's filling up your save, there's a higher chance of something going wrong with it. Or in another specific instance, I know a lot of Bethesda game players know this, your save file is so big that it takes a really long time to load. It can happen if you get to that point. I think the most unforgivable thing though is if that save gets corrupted, because if you lose any game save with hundreds and hundreds of hours, it's devastating. You almost want to just walk away and never come back. But let's be real, most of the time, you'll be back. You'll be back. You'll totally just start a new game and log in another 500 hours. We've all been there. And at number 9, let's talk about something that many players who are hooked on a game have a tendency to do, but they don't always want to admit it, and that is save scumming, or basically abusing a save system to your advantage. Maybe you're obsessed with playing through a level absolutely perfectly and you're mashing the save key every 5 seconds. Or you build up a whole library of multiple saves of different scenarios that you can constantly refer back to and try again and play something out a different way. Now, if you're just thinking of something like stealth games, this sounds like a pretty normal thing, right? You save a lot, right? And you use a lot of trial and error. But think about doing this for basically any type of game. They call it save scumming for a reason, because it's kind of like cheesing your way through something, but we're not going to hate on it at all because we've all done it once or twice. And at number 8, here's how you know you're definitely hardcore with something. You get that crazy over-the-top achievement or goal reached that most people don't even have. You might get to a point where you achieve a milestone that only a handful of other people in the entire world have. Think of the insanity achievement in World of Warcraft, for example. You can't just be a standard player to get things like this. You have to have a deeply rooted obsession with a game to get some of those top-end achievements or rewards without cheating your way to the top. And you know what? This is another one that you should be proud of. If you did get that far and you were that crazy about a game and you got to that point, you know what? Congratulations, you earned that. I hope you find some fulfillment. You probably won't, because most of us who play games have a deep black void in a place of our hearts. But hey, it doesn't stop us from going out and trying to fill that void, does it? And at number 7, you know you are definitely addicted to a game when you run out of things to do in a game like Skyrim or a Fallout or The Witcher 3. While this isn't the craziest thing to accomplish, I know many people out there have done it. I myself have in a few games. And these types of games don't go on forever, but they do have some of the biggest checklists in terms of things to complete. But you know, if you are a hardcore completionist, you look at those lists not like a big, daunting, exhausting challenge in front of you, but as something to keep you busy and something that you really just want to do. You don't even think twice about it. Look, by running out of things to do in one of these games, it doesn't make you special, it doesn't make you like the best of the best, but I think when you run out of things to do in such a big game, you can at least stop, take a minute, and look in the mirror and say, fuck yeah. And at number 6, I think a really good example of some weird things that people do when they're hooked on a game is some of the weird things that Sims players do to get the perfect baby. Yes, you heard that right. There's a lot of crazy things that players do in games, but I think this is probably one of the best examples. For some reason, and especially in The Sims 2 and The Sims 3, like, there's so much myth and mystery around pregnancy in the game. It's almost like real life. There's all these weird superstitions about certain things you can do to affect the gender and the way your baby comes out. Comes out? Does that make sense? How they are created? I don't know. It gets really hardcore with The Sims 3, where traits can be passed on through birth from your older Sims, and the fact that there's a likelihood that you can have twins if you play your cards right. People have tried everything from making their Sims only eat potato chips, to only eating raw straight up watermelon or apples to have a boy or a girl, only having sex in certain types of beds, and everything in between. All this weird micromanagement stuff that isn't just exclusive to The Sims. You've probably seen it in plenty of other RPGs or other simulation games. But when you're taking that much time to pay attention to the weird minutia of games to influence the impact of other things happening in the game, I think it's safe to say that you are addicted to said game. And at number 5, you know you're definitely playing some addictive games when your WASD keys get worn out. The same could also be said about your arrow keys, but most likely it's the WASD keys first, because those things will take a beating, especially if you were playing a game for like 12 hours a day. Or more. I guess maybe that's just a conservative estimate on my part. There's also the special gaming keyboards that have the WASD and the arrow keys labeled a different color, but I'm also thinking that the reason they use a different color is also just to differentiate and maybe take away from the impact of the keys looking like they're worn out. But especially if you're gaming on a cheap keyboard, you can wear out those suckers real quick and need a replacement. And I think that's definitely a telltale sign for PC game addiction. And at number 4, here's another sign of a PC gamer hooked on something. It's the mark, that special weird callus or bruise you get on your wrist from resting your hands on a keyboard and a mouse, possibly straight at the edges of a table. This almost permanent mark that shows up just from playing games that's crazy. That means you are playing a game a ton. I'm not going to shame you on it, but what I am going to shame you on is a lack of optimization of where you play. Because honestly, you should have a really good mouse pad or a nice keyboard that will reduce you getting any sort of bruising or marks on your hand, because that's crazy. And at number 3, something that I think some addicted gamers will face, and I think it's also the case for people who really love movies, is when you find yourself feeling more for video game characters than actual real people. I know that sounds crazy, but think about it sometimes. Like, some people really like to cite when Morgan shows up in Dragon Age Inquisition and just feeling more emotion about seeing someone for the first time in a while than you do in real life. Or when it looks like Meryl is apparently dying in Metal Gear Solid and you care more than you ever thought you would about a digital character that's not even real. Or even when you know who gets killed in Final Fantasy VII, like just stuff like that can hit you so deep, and it might actually make you stop and think that you care more about people in a game than you do in real life. It's definitely probably not the case, but sometimes it might feel like it. Because I mean, if you add up the hours of playing a game, chances are you're spending more time with some of these game characters than your real life family members or friends. This of course doesn't encompass every gamer, but some out there I definitely think would agree with that. And at number 2, you definitely know you're addicted to some games when your bill for replacing mice or controllers costs more than the amount of money you've actually even spent on buying new games. Have you ever had that problem where you find yourself spending more money on the actual stuff you use to play the games than the actual games themselves? I think this is, again, very much a PC gamer thing, because it's not even with just controllers or keyboards, it can be also just hardware components themselves, you burning out another CPU or a graphics card. And when you tally up the cost of how much you spent on gaming, you're spending it on all the stuff that actually it takes to play the games, not the games themselves. And the biggest thing, and I think the thing that shows how hooked you truly are, is that you don't even bat an eye. That's money well spent, you probably think, and you don't even regret any of it. If you play a lot, you know you go through controllers like crazy because they break. And of course, the same thing with a keyboard and mouse, they get worn out. It's okay, it happens to all of us. Just make sure you can pay your rent first, all right? And at number 1, I think the biggest thing that addicted gamers face is probably just the amount of time you've spent in a game. More particularly, you bring up the time you spent in a game, maybe even in particular something like an MMO, and it looks like a huge percentage of your life in terms of actual days played. There are people out there who have logged over 365 days in something like World of Warcraft. So when you have to stop and think about that and how that's a year of your life, that's insane. Again, the word addiction is very rigorously defined, but this has to come at least close to it. If you've spent something like 365 days in a game and say you're something like 20 years old, that's a percentage of your life. But I think on a positive note, if you look at the hundreds and hundreds of hours or days you've spent playing a game, you can at least try and think that most of those times were spent having fun. And you know what? That's what matters, right? You can't overdose on fun. That's what my grandma used to say. That's not true, but whatever. But what I do want to know in the comments from you guys is some sort of problem that you faced playing games that make you think that maybe you're addicted to a certain game. Be sure to let us know down in the comments if you have any crazy stories exemplifying how hooked on a game you have been. We are definitely looking forward to hearing it, and if you got enough crazy stories, maybe we'll make another video out of it. But you guys know the deal. As always, clicking the like button helps us out a ton, but if you are new, clicking that circle and subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.